All right, well, I guess we may as well get going if everybody's good to go. So, hi, everybody. I'm Niss Tymbrimi. Uh, this is intro to the Wormhole campus. I've been wanting to do this for a little while, but I waited until I was in the campus for quite a while before I scheduled the class to share with others, so hopefully that'll be of some use. I've been in the uni since beginning of March or something, I guess, is when I don't know, somewhere around there anyways. And I've been in the Wormhole campus itself for the last, must be 2 or 3 months now, maybe. It seems like I've been there for a long time. So I have quite a bit of experience with wormholes at this point, because I guess I live in one now. So it's all fun and games. Yeah, so I don't know, I'd just give you an understanding of where I'm coming from. I have not been living in wormholes for years. I've been living at the Wormhole campus for months and months now, so I've got a good handle on the campus and what we do there, and good time to get the next group of people thinking about coming to the campus, because it is fun. For the people who can enjoy that kind of lifestyle, it's a lot of fun. So the class here, we're just going to sort of cover a little bit of stuff, more or less what people were talking about at the beginning there, mass limits on wormholes, just a little bit about, what wormholes are and all the rest. There's actually a Wormhole 100 class coming up in a couple of days, I'm sure I saw on the schedule, so we won't talk about it, the nitty-gritty too much, leave that for a dedicated class, but it's good for people who don't necessarily have a deep understanding of what goes on in wormholes to get a bit of an idea what's going on. So what is it? Then we call it W space or whatever, wormhole space, a collection of systems that don't have fixed connections between them. So if you could see them on a map, you would just see a whole bunch of systems like you see on the EVE map, but there would be no lines between them, at least not on a regular basis, because there is no standard connections between them. The connections between W space systems are other wormholes, and they sort of form and collapse according to the rules of wormholes, and they're a bit random. So there is no map, you can't see them, but that contrasts with the rest of the galaxy or the rest of the universe, whatever you want to call it, that we call K-space, K for known space, which is what you see when you open the map. You can see all the, low sec, null sec, high sec, all of that is K-space. W space doesn't show up on the map, and it's just as well, just because, you wouldn't make much sense of seeing it on a map. Anyways. What is this link we are being shown?
They tried making a Wormhole Space map a few months ago. I'm not sure if they ever actually finished it.
It's kind of meaningless, though, right? Because, there's no relationship between the systems, right? You know what I mean? Other than just, you can number all the systems, but then, what does it tell you, It's kind of interesting to see them try, though. Yeah, well, you can make a W space map, but it's dynamic. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go along, because it's kind of hard to get around if you don't have some sense, but the map is dynamic. We build it as we scan signatures down, and so it's dynamic. It runs through a web browser. We use a mapper to sort of keep track of what's going on in the systems. Oh, and I'm getting a conversation, too. Is that you, Croy? Oh, just somebody giving me a wave. I'm trying to coordinate this with the guys back at the campus, because they love having visitors, so they're very excited that a fleet's coming in. Anyway, so W space versus K space. It is kind of a different world. Things are a little bit different. We love targets. Things are a little bit different for you in there. So anyways, that's just to give you an idea of what we call W space and wormhole space, what it is. It's obviously accessed via wormholes, which always appear as cosmic signatures. You scan them down with your scanning frigates or whatever. I'm sure if any of you have done any exploration or scanning, you've scanned down signatures that have turned out to be wormholes. That's how you get into them. It's also how you transit between wormhole systems. There'll be wormholes that take you from one wormhole to another, and we can get into it later on. We'll do a chat while we're traveling and stuff. But it's quite interesting, actually, the lay of the land in W space, because although the connections are a little bit random, there is sort of a method to the madness. There are certain static connections that will form in C6s and C5s and C4s and C3s and things like that. So although you don't know where the connection is going to take you, there'll always be a connection in a given system, for example, to some other, C4 or C6. As you get deeper and deeper into wormhole space, it sort of gets harder and harder to find a direct connection back out to K-space. So the Wormhole campus is located in a C2 wormhole, class 2. they're ranked just number-wise, just so we get that out of the way, C1, C2, C3, C4. Yeah, so think of it as a difficulty level. C1 is, they're pretty low-key. The kind of NPCs that you're going to run into, the sleepers aren't that challenging, that kind of thing. C2 is a little bit tougher, C3 is a little bit tougher, and so on, until you get into the C6s, which are absolutely brutal places to try and exist. Although it's fun, again, for the kind of people who enjoy that kind of living, it's good stuff. But anyways, it's sort of interesting, the lay of the land, because once you get into C5s, which are the second most difficult of the wormholes, the nature of the connections there are such that you're likely to get more connections to other C5s, so people start referring to it as like a super highway. So there is sort of this sense that you're in a certain place, but anyway, the lay of the land can be kind of interesting. But anyways, just so that you have some context, especially if you haven't been in wormholes seriously before, and just poking around in one doesn't count as spending much time in one. But contrast it with what you already know. I mean, high sec we're all familiar with because we all fly around high sec all the time. Then you've got low sec, which what happens in low sec? There's still some rules in play. There's still things that can get you into trouble. Gate guns, security hits for attacking neutrals and things like that. And but there's other restrictions on low sec, right? Like nobody deploys bubbles in low sec and things like that. So yeah, it's a PvP environment, but a slightly tamer one. Get out to null sec, and now you're sort of starting to feel more like the Wild West. I mean, anything goes. Anybody attacks anybody. You can use bubbles. You can use all the rest of it. In that sense, W space is null sec. It's considered -1 security status. Anything goes. I mean, bubbles, anything else. The difference between nullsec and W space comes from, one, the lack of local, which we'll talk about afterwards. You don't see who's in the system with you in your local display. And because you're doing all this travel via wormholes, and the wormholes have, we've already talked about mass, there's things that will collapse the wormholes. You don't really have giant fleets moving around in W space much, just because, you move a giant fleet through a wormhole, you're going to collapse it, and then you're not getting back. So the nature of PvP tends to be smaller scale. It tends to be small gang. A lot of fighting gets done on holes, so there's a tendency for armor fit ships to be more popular, just because everybody ends up sitting in front of each other's face and shooting at each other. Not as much kiting going on. Not to say you can't do it. It's just more common to get into armor-related incidents. So that's just to give you some idea. If you have some understanding of lower nullsec, that puts it in perspective. Like W space is, for all intents and purposes, nullsec. At least in terms of the mechanics when you're in there. So what does that mean then? No Concord, no one's coming to your rescue except your friends. If you have any, there's no stations, so there's no docking up anywhere. No shopping that you're doing in a wormhole. There's no stations, no trade hubs, no market where you can buy things, and no NPCs in the traditional sense. There's no belts, so you won't be mining in belts or anything like that. The only NPCs that are there are sleepers, which are a particular kind of drone that defend the combat sites and even the gas sites and things that you're used to. Actually, I should mention quickly, in outside of wormholes, data sites, relic sites, people like doing exploration. In wormholes, the data sites and relic sites are defended, actually, and quite well defended. They're much harder than the normal anomalies in a given wormhole, so they have to be cleared out. So, if you want to do exploration in a wormhole, okay, that's great, but I mean, you have to clear the sites before you can start hacking cans and things like that. So, no NPCs in the traditional sense, though. They're all sleepers. If you're interested in sleepers, by the way, or want a little hint of what comes, we'll maybe go and might go run a site or two and shoot at them. They have no shields, the sleepers, so they're kind of odd when you first see them. You lock them up and you're like, hey, wait a second, why are there only two little concentric circles on my display? It's because they have no shields. They have only armor and structure, but boy, do they have really, really, really high resists compared to what you're used to from the rats out here. So you get used to killing them. I mean, it's just another kind of NPC, but they are a much tougher kind of NPC than you're used to from regular space. What else is going on? I already mentioned no local. This is something we all get used to looking at all the time, especially with war targets. We're always wanting to see what's going on. You want to see if you're out in a fleet. Somebody will be watching to see how many people are in local right now, and if there's a spike, I mean, this is a significant event because it means a whole bunch of people have jumped into the system. There is no lull in a wormhole. None. Well, I shouldn't say none. You won't show up in it unless you speak. If you speak in local, your name will appear on the local list to anybody that comes into the system for the next 15 minutes. But generally speaking, you don't see anybody in local. You feel very alone all the time. But of course, the danger is just because there's no information doesn't mean there's not a massive fleet in the system with you, just waiting for you to wander into their sites, you know. So it's a different kind of way to live. You get used to it, and if you're into it, I don't like local anymore. I've been in wormholes for so long that when I'm out in case space like this and I see all these names in local, it makes me a little bit creepy, you know, because I don't know, I'm not used to seeing all these names, you know. I'm used to it being silent. Like if you like that kind of thing, which I do, it puts the I would say it puts the onus on you. You have control over how dangerous you feel at the moment, you know. Like, I mean, because you just have to assume that there's other people in the system with you, even if you can't see them. So yeah, no look. I already mentioned no belts, no ice. Any mining that you have to do has to be done in ore sites, which there are anomalies that show up on your map, but there's always this potential for sleepers. Sometimes they're not even there at the beginning. Gas sites, for example, where you'll want to. It's sort of the wormhole equivalent, huffing on the gas, mining the gas. There's often no sleepers there when you first get there, but after a short period of time, 5-10 minutes, there will be some sleepers spawn that you have to fight them off if you expect to get the rest of the gas. But anyways, just give you some idea of what's there. I'll also briefly mention a difference between wormholes and gate mechanics, because we think about them the same way, don't we? Like, I mean, yeah, it's a wormhole, I jump through it. It's a gate, I jump through it. You know, it's sort of the same idea. But the mechanics are really, really different. In K-Space, gates have a certain set of rules to them, right? Like, if you've aggressed an opponent, if you started shooting at somebody, you can't jump through the gate for 1 minute after you de-aggress, right? You can't take an aggressive action for a minute before you jump through a gate. So this becomes a game. If you're trying to bait people on a gate, you're trying to get them to engage so that, okay, now you know, even if he de-aggresses, you got a minute to shoot at him on this side before he can jump through again. Wormholes don't have that mechanic at all. You can jump through wormholes while you're fighting. It makes no difference whatsoever. The big difference is that wormholes have what's called polarization, which is it's a game mechanic inside the game. When you go through a wormhole, your ship has now been polarized in that direction through the wormhole. So, for tonight, for example, we'll go to the wormhole that we'll get into the campus through. Right when you go through it, you've all been polarized for 5 minutes in that direction. So if you tried to jump again in the same direction within the 5 minutes, it won't let you jump. And it's got nothing to do with combat. You just can't do it. So once you've jumped through into the wormhole campus, okay, that's fine. You can jump right back out again, but you won't be able to come back through again for 5 minutes. So this really changes the mechanics of PvP, right? It's no longer about getting a person to engage, because they can just jump back through the wormhole anytime they feel like it, as long as they're not polarized. Instead, the game becomes forcing them through the wormhole until you get them on one side polarized, and then pummel them as well. But just so you have some understanding, they behave like gates. I even sometimes call them gates, but there's a real difference in the way wormholes behave as compared to gates. So just as a little sort of overview thing, so you have some understanding of that. And I mentioned already the nature of PvP. That's sort of the last of the sort of intro-y things I wanted to mention, is that because of the mass limits on wormholes, a PvP tends to be it's small gang focused. Not a lot of battleships get used. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. The reason battleships aren't used is because of their mass. They're so big. Those are what we use to roll a wormhole. If there's a wormhole that we don't want for some reason, well, you can collapse it voluntarily. You just have to push enough mass through it to collapse the wormhole. Battleships get used for that because they're nice and big, and you push one through a few times, and you can collapse the wormholes. Otherwise, though, you don't use them much, just because you couldn't take much of a fleet of battleships through a wormhole. You won't be getting back again. So most of the fighting tends to be done in smaller ships, small signature radius ships, anyways. So cruisers, battle cruisers are a good place to start because, nice ship that you don't need a lot of skill to fly. But anybody who's planning to spend a lot of time in wormholes over the long haul tend to focus more on the cruiser hulls. Things like heavy assault cruisers, Or strategic cruisers are the godsend in Wormholes. One of the most common ships you run into are the Tech 3. So, yeah, it's kind of neat. It's a neat way to live, but I mean, you ultimately will be flying very shiny ships that cost a lot of money when you lose them. So, fortunately, the opportunities for money making are also quite high in Wormholes, so I guess it all balances out. So anyways, before we get on with anything else, I've just given you sort of a little smattering of things, a little overview of the way things are in Wormhole, so I'll just check and see if there's any questions or anything before we get on with a bit of campus stuff and get a fleet together and get out of here.
So basically you just take one ship in and that's it? You live on that one ship?
No, that's not true. But you do have a more limited selection of ships. Like storage space is more limited. So I mean, you're not going to be 20, 30 ships just lying around waiting to see when you want to pick up. I mean, it's very space intensive. But no, you don't have to live in just one ship at all. And there's a question in the channel there about how do you refit. We use anchorable arrays. So there's the anchorable objects that you put in space. They behave just like the Orca, so you can refit as long as you're close to one of those. I mean, you can store things in these containers, including ships, and you can refit while you're close to them. That's pretty much your only option, that or an Orca to enable you to refit. But now, our wormhole, I haven't started talking about the campus yet, but our wormhole, I said it's a C2. So it's not, the most dangerous place by itself. It's only a Class 2 wormhole, which is not that difficult. And we have, I'll have to define what these terms mean as we go along, but we have static connections. Every wormhole that you end up sitting in will have what we call static connections. Static makes it sound like it's there all the time, which is a bit misleading. What it means is that there will be some number, and that number is either 1 or 2, connections. There'll be a wormhole that forms in that system. It could be anywhere, but there'll always be one wormhole of a specific type that takes you to a specific kind of system. So our wormhole is a C2, and it has both a C3 static and a high-sec static. So that means that at any given moment, there will always be the one wormhole which leads to a high-sec system. It'll be random and different every time that wormhole forms, but there'll always be a high-sec connection through one of the holes, and there'll always be a connection to a Class 3, and those we call static wormholes, because if the high-sec static collapses, another high-sec will open somewhere in the system. It won't go to the same place, obviously, but the kind of system. Because we're in a C2, the wormhole campus, and we always have a high-sec connection, it's not as bad. Like if you need to do something unusual, something that requires you to go out to a station, usually you just pop out the high-sec hole and just visit a station there and do what you need to do and come back. So it's not as bad as if you were living deep in a C5 or something where you may not have an easy connection out to K-space somewhere. Ours, you've always got a guaranteed connection to high-sec, so it's not as bad as you might think. No, there's no notion of sovereignty in wormhole space. I mean, okay, yeah, we can claim it, like we claim our wormhole, like we live in it, it's ours. But there's no notion of sovereignty or anything like that. You can't put up sovereignty structures or anything like that. And politics in wormholes, there are sort of loose alliances that form, and I guess some formal alliances deeper in wormholes, like the big wormhole corporations. They have large alliances or larger alliances. And it's mostly, it's not even to say, just because you're an alliance doesn't even mean you wouldn't fight each other. Like, I mean, wormholes combat is... what's the right word for it? Highly desired, like we're always looking for PvP, because unlike nullsec, where if you just sit on a gate for a while, somebody will jump you. In wormhole space, it can sometimes be a little bit hard to get a fight. So, I mean, when you get a sense that there's something going on, or if there's a fight, I mean, but also very healthy. There's not a lot of the political infighting. I've never run into really nasty people living in wormholes. There's a certain amount of respect. We had a fleet come in once to arm wormhole. It's about a month ago now, and they basically were saying fight. Like they wanted a fight and they want it right now. Well, okay, we could have all sat in our player-owned star bases and under behind the shields, and they couldn't really have done anything. But that looks bad on you, right? Like if you do not take fights, it's entirely possible. And you're asking about politics. Those people may decide we don't belong in that wormhole, and they'll come and try to eject us, which, like, literally, they'll just come and start attacking the bosses and, ultimately try to eject you from the wormhole. But it's actually a nice community. Like, I mean, yeah, you're going to fight people, but I mean, the people that you're just, fought, you may very well come to their defense the next day, Like, I mean, if something's going on that is of common interest. So, an interesting political structure, but nothing like nullsec. Nothing like nullsec at all. No, in wormholes, no, there's no politics. Like, as E-UNI members, in wormholes, the rule that we use, you may have seen this on various wiki pages, that there'll be rules about, whatever, if it's neutral, you're not allowed to shoot it. If it's red, you're allowed to shoot it, blah, blah, blah. In wormholes, our rule is not blue, shoot it. So in other words, if it's somebody that's not explicitly aligned with the Ivy League, yeah, we just shoot them. Like, I mean, there's no, and they'll do the same to you. So no, there's no political issues. If you want to fly through a wormhole and, like, the people don't like you, they're going to come and kill you, and that's all good. It's all, how much risk are you willing to accept? No jump clones in W space. Like, you'd have to be in a capital ship, right? There's certain ships that you can put clone vats in, and I'm sure you can put a jump clone in a clone vat, but again, you'd have to be in the kind of wormhole where, like, you're actually deploying capitals, which I think we have a capital ship. I think we have a carrier in there somewhere, but you know what I mean? It's not going anywhere. I mean, it just sits in there all the time. So you'd have to be in a more sophisticated place. But yeah, no jump clones. If I get potted in Wormhole campus, my medical clone's at Aldrat. So, like, that's where I end up back at, is Aldrat when I'm done. And that's right, yeah, it's all player-owned starbases. That's the only kind of structure. So people used to describe it as living out of a can, because that's what people used to do. You'd bring in, a large anchorable container. You'd anchor it in space, and then you're essentially living out of this container. That's the only place that you would keep your stuff. Since the Odyssey patch, they made things a little bit easier because they put in something called personal hangar arrays, which are another anchorable structure, but it works a lot more like your station does, or your inventory, in that, like, everybody has a personal hangar array, and it's completely safe. What you put in there can't be touched by other people, and that kind of thing. So, but otherwise, yes, you're living in posses, which means that ships are being stored in communal structures. This is starting to get into the campus stuff, so I don't want to get too far into that. We'll talk about that in a sec. Oh yeah, anything can get shot, but they'd have to, like, I mean, that's not going to come as a surprise, though, right? Because they already would have taken out your POS shield by the time they're shooting at your personal hangar array. Yeah, and what Angus said is correct. Battlecruiser, especially for the low-skilled, battlecruiser is a good first ship to bring in, because, they're beefy, you can put a good tank on them, they're not too massive that they cause problems with going through the holes and things like that. But as you skill yourself up, it's very desirable to get into the cruisers. So, again, heavy assault cruisers, Tech 3 cruisers, that kind of thing. No, solo, no. Unless you've got some plan in mind. Like, I mean, I'm sure if you go in a Tech 3 strategic cruiser, in a C1, C2 for sure, I'll bet you can clear the sites out, and then you can hack them in the same ship. So in that sense, you could, in theory, do it. But certainly you're not going in a Covops or a, little Tech 1 frigate and just, hacking open cans and things like that. It's not going to happen. I mean, there's sleepers guarding the sites. You have to clear them out first. No, you're asking to get popped if you're there, like, at all, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter what you're flying. And actually, it's something that the Wormhole campus has taught me, which is, it's a worthwhile thing. I mean, I highly recommend it. If you can enjoy living in a wormhole, it's a great experience living in the Wormhole campus, because you get a new appreciation for these ships. Like, I really thought that, battlecruisers, well, they're just clearly better than cruisers, and battleships, well, they're clearly better than battlecruisers. And it turns out that's not the case. As you become more skilled, there's a reason those Tech 3 cruisers are used. Yeah, they're low sig radius and all the rest, but man, you can fit incredible tanks on them and do insane DPS with a strategic cruiser. Like, I guess you should be able to do something good with something that probably set you back $500 million to fit. But you really get a new appreciation for the cruisers, right? Because you don't do as many things solo. Scanning you can do solo. You can go out and look, maybe try and find somebody to gank in a stealth bomber or something like that, if you're hurting for something to do. But the vast majority of activities you do at the Wormhole campus are done fleeted. If you're going to go run sites, which is sort of the primary way that people make money is running sites. No, we do it in fleets with logistic support and everything else. So the focus is more on, make sure you have enough buffer and enough resist so that the Logi can get reps on you, get repairs on you in time before you blow up. Other than that, it doesn't really matter, right? So as long as you can get good DPS out of a cruiser hull, which once your skills are up, you can get great DPS out of the cruiser hulls. Though they're very viable ships to fly. Not so much Tech 1. You'll move out of the Tech 1 stuff very quickly. Although some of them are still very useful, right? Celestis, it's a damping cruiser. It's the Galente damping thing. Boy, does that ever get a lot of use? I mean, that's a great ship. Lovely Tech 1 cruiser. Doesn't even require a lot of skill to fly, but really, really useful in PvP situations. So, okay, let's move on and talk about the campus a little bit then. I try to get across to people that it requires a certain kind of self-starter to live in W space, and I do see that question there. How populated? There's actually usually a reasonable number of people on. It'll ebb and flow during the day depending on people's time zones. So there's very much a European crowd who's on. What to me seems earlier in the day because I live in the Eastern time zone. But then there's another group of people, like those people kind of, start trickling off as you get into the eve, or as I get into my evening, and then, another group comes on. And yeah, there's no finding a fleet. You'll always be in the fleet. The one sort of rule of being in the Wormhole campus is that you're always in the WHC fleet. So it's not hard to find a fleet at all because you'll always be in it. You'll get dragged around and do things whether you like it or not, because you might have logged on hoping to run some sites and make some money. But if there's PvP going on, I can guarantee everybody will be off doing PvP, and thus so will you. So easy to find a fleet. It's just, it may not always be your choice. Maybe you feel like PvP, but everybody wants to run sites right now, That's true. All the campuses have a standing fleet. In the Wormhole campus, it's really quite critical that you be in it, because if somebody jumps you somewhere, it's the fact that you're on Mumble with the fleet is the only thing that's going to save your bacon if you can hold out until somebody can come there to rescue you, which can happen very, very quickly. You get used to living out of a can, and when something happens, it's incredible how fast people will get in ships and be on a hole ready to start fighting. Somebody will have taken the reins as the fleet commander and so forth. So it's quite an experience. But anyways, it's not too much hand-holding. That's not to say that it's not a learning environment. It's first and foremost a learning environment. That's what it's there for. This is the E-UNI, and the Wormhole campus is specifically there so people can get a feel for what it's like to live in a wormhole. It's not entirely representative because the really serious wormhole corporations will all live in, deep in C5s or even C6 wormholes. So it's a little different because, now you can now start talking about capital ships and all that kind of stuff. But the Wormhole campus is a good a chance to get your feet wet, see if it's for you. Some people will crave living in one. Other people, the lack of local drive them nuts. Most active time zone for the WHC, I don't know. I find plenty of people are on from, even early in the morning. If I have a day off work or something, I find people online early in the day. You might get a little bit of a lull around kind of dinner time, and then people are on again. It can vary a bit from day to day. Sometimes people get busy, but... Oh, no. The money can be excellent. Running sites is very, very lucrative. These are the combat anomalies. They're the same anomalies. It probably is most active in EU, but there's a little bit of overlap there. I haven't found a big issue with it personally. Yeah, day off work. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not expensive to live there. Not really. It's expensive just because you're flying more expensive ships, or will quickly end up flying more expensive ships, and thus when, and it happens, you get out there, you try and do some PvP, you realize that, oh man, this was just a mistake, and before you know it, everybody's dead, and you've lost billions of ISK worth of ships. But running the sites is, which is combat anomalies, same anomalies that you find in K-Space, but these are all defended by sleepers, and they drop loot, which is The blue loot, people refer to it as, is just stuff that drops off the ships. There's standing NPC buy orders for them at the trade hubs, so like it's instant money and it's quite lucrative. If we ran, what did we do? We did the other day. We ran about 25 sites, I think, which maybe took 80 minutes or something. And I think the total amount of loot that we brought from that one run was probably about 1.5 billion ISK for the fleet. And there was like maybe 10 or 11 or 12 people, so, you know what I mean? Like everybody saw about 100 million or 110 million for the 90 minutes of work. Like, that's not bad. And yeah, multiple income streams, as somebody just mentioned there. I mean, you can also do PI. There's other ways you can supplement your income, but like running sites is quite lucrative. So the idea is, yeah, you run sites to get the ISK that you use to buy expensive ships that you then blow up in PvP. So it's a lovely symmetrical thing in a wormhole. So anyways, not too much hand-holding, and that doesn't mean you don't learn. You'll learn. Please ask questions. If you join the campus, do not hesitate to ask questions. That's why they're there. What they mean by the hand-holding is if you're logging on waiting for somebody else to give you something to do, you'll get bored faster. Like, I mean, if you want to run sites, well, hey, why don't you go check out the adjoining wormholes, and if there's combat anomalies there and it's been scanned down, great. Why don't you start pushing? Why don't you form the fleet? You take fleet commander responsibilities. People are always wanting to run. You'll always find people wanting to run sites if there's not something else going on. So just take the initiative. Go do something. If you feel like getting some PvP going on, well, go find some. I mean, point being, just if you just log on and sit there in the pause and wait for somebody to give you something to do, you will get bored. So anyways, do you need to be good at PvP? Oh, no. Actually, I would say that the majority of us suck. No, that's not true. There's some really good PvPers in the Wormhole campus, but like I wasn't huge on PvP until I joined the Wormhole campus, and then I started doing a lot more PvP, and I've gotten better at it over time. But you're certainly not expected to be good. Just be expected to learn. Get in the fleet. Don't be afraid to go. Throw yourself in harm's way. Yeah, you're going to get blown up, but who cares? Like, I mean, you'll make lots of money running sites, so don't worry about it. It depends. There seems to be a lot of PI activity going on in our wormhole right now, but I mean, I don't believe they're all being sucked dry by any means. And don't forget, you can get a little bit creative about this. Like, if you're really into PI, like, nothing would stop you. I mean, you're going to need some money to make this happen, but nothing would stop you from making use of another wormhole. It would have to be something that has a high-sec connection or something, so you could find it again, or you'd leave a scanning alt in there or something so that you can find the wormhole out when you need to get back into it. So no, the planets aren't being sucked dry. I know one person really wants the lava planet, and he's giving other people grief if they start doing PI on the lava planet, but I don't know. There's the politics for you. It's only between us.
I'm going to have to ask you who's giving grief about the lava planet. But not
it's Alex.
It's Alex? Okay.
Yeah.
He and I might have
Alex
some discussions.
Alex was giving somebody grief the other day because he said something about, no, go ahead, go do whatever, but don't use the lava planet. So I don't know, he wants the lava planet. I don't know. No, the transit fleet should just be docked up at Alderac because we haven't even formed it yet. So what other things can I say? Well, we've already mentioned a few things. Like, the group fleet really is the center of activity, even if you're solo. Like, I mean, and people do that. There's one guy on the campus, he really likes going out, and he'll go out into low sec and look for, people ratting or things like that, and he'll gank them in his stealth bomber and things like that. But even when he does that, he's still in the fleet, He's giving you information. You're always hearing things, somebody will get a good connection to somewhere like Rancer. We had a good connection to Rancer yesterday, and people were really motivated. They wanted to go in and start breaking up the gate camps in Rancer because we had a good connection, and we don't have to jump into Rancer through a gate. We'd be coming in the middle of Rancer because that hole happened to be in Rancer, right? So, fun and games. So yeah, fleet's the center of activity, even if you're solo. I should mention about eligibility, and I think I had a link here for you. One sec. So that link there is just to the Wormhole campus page on the wiki, but if you scroll down, it'll tell you about requirements for joining the campus. They're actually being pretty relaxed about this. At one point, they said that like Battlecruisers 3 was kind of mandatory, but I know Sylvanium, who's the director of the campus, I know he said recently that he doesn't consider that a hard and fast requirement anymore. So, I mean, use this as a guideline. I mean, what you're going to want to have skill-wise to really enjoy life in a wormhole, scanning skills and some kind of combat ship skills with the ability to fit a Tech 2 tank. Like, that's sort of the most important thing. Ultimately, your enjoyment will be increased the more roles that you can fill in the campus. So scanning is something that's just pervasive. Everybody's really needs to be scanning all the time. I mean, it's just the nature of living in changing fluid space like that. You have to be scanning and be aware of your environment. So most people need a scanning skill set. Doesn't have to be dramatic. I think, what do they have there? Basic level, they're just listing Astrometrics 3 and 0 in the 3 support skills for scanning. 4 in Astrometrics and 3 in the supports is pretty good. You won't have a lot of problems if you've got Astrometrics 4 and 3 in the scanning support skills. Combat, obviously, because you'll want to run sites or get involved in PvP, so I mean, you want to be able to fly a ship of some kind. But then the more roles you can fulfill, the better it is for you. So, for example, we need to roll the wormholes, which means collapse them on purpose by pushing enough mass through them to collapse them. That usually involves flying battleships. Battleships are what we use to, so if you have some, you don't have to have like mad skills with them, but if you're able to fly one of the battleship hulls, that's great. You can jump into a battleship and help roll a hole. Logistics are very important. I mean, all of our fleet operations are done with logistic support, so the demand for Guardian pilots in particular is very high. So again, if over time you can train yourself, into a Guardian with high logistics, that's great. There's another role that you're able to perform for the campus. The more of those things, but you don't have to come in with all that stuff. Just, come in with some basic ability to scan, like the ability to, at least fly a, decent battle cruiser, and most importantly, Tech 2 tank. And if you have to pick one tank, the tank to pick is armor. And again, that's just the nature of wormholes are such that it favors armor-based tanks most of the time. There has been an increasing push to fly more shield fleets, so there have been shield fleets flying recently, but again, most people will end up wanting to be able to fit both armor and shield tank anyways, so eventually it'll all come together for you. But if you had to pick one to come in with, I would come in with the armor tank. That's by far the most useful Tech 2 tank to come in with. The rest you can work on as you go along. But anyways, the other requirements are there, though, with regards to joining the campus. Yeah. And then there's a list as well here. I'll give you another link. Oh, actually, you know what? It's on that one anyways, isn't it? Yeah, actually, I wrote a little section on there. If you scroll down a little bit from the top on the Wormhole campus page, you see a little section there on Beyond Skills, the Wormhole Mindset. That was me just trying to paint a little bit of a picture just to make sure people understood sort of not just where you're coming from, but like the idea of where, if you were planning to stay, you'd be going to, So I try to point out that the cruisers are actually very, very valuable and things like that. And then there's a section there on what can I do. And yeah, I've already said that scan. There's lots of PvE opportunities. It's all running sites, really. So on the sheet there, it says shoot sleepers for ISK, which would be true. Lots of PvP. You can go find it yourself. Baiting becomes a big deal in a wormhole because, again, the people in there tend to, especially your neighbors, we may be kind of the noobs in there, but other people that are living in wormholes typically have been living there for a while. You do find idiots, but a lot of them have been living there for a while, and they can be quite good. So, just because you're sitting there doesn't mean somebody's going to jump you. I mean, they may think that, this is a trap, I don't like where this is going. So, the skill to creatively bait another group to actually get a fight is something that gets a lot of practice in wormholes. Practice combat probing. It's something you don't do as much when you're out in case space is combat probing. In wormholes, if somebody's in the wormhole and doesn't have a cloaking device, it won't be long before you'll be able to warp right on top of them because people will combat scan the guy down. I love that. Yanking clueless day trippers. That's one of my favorite pastimes. Yeah, you feel bad. The noob comes in. We've had people come in like in a venture, and they warp right to some kind of, thing where they start mining, in an ore site or something like that. And you're just like, oh, like if he's really populated wormhole, he doesn't know what he's doing. And yeah, we all jump him like flies on manure and, torch the poor guy. Although we're too nice, right? Because very often, if you look at him new, people often send these newbies money to cover their loss and tell them to maybe join the uni and things like that. So, we're a happy crowd, I guess, for the most part in the campus. You can do industrial stuff, gas harvesting, you can mine gas. Conventional mining, although, again, it's not in belts or anything like that, it's in ore sites. You can do PI. We do have POSs that allow you to do Tech 2 and Tech 3 research and production. Let's not get into that. I mean, just be aware that it is possible to do it. We have the resources set up to allow people to do it. And it is, like they're saying, they're experiencing lawless space, and that's true. Learn how to live without stations. I mean, it turns out I wasn't as dependent on stations as I thought. You got to slip out every once in a while to do some shopping, but and some of that other stuff we've already talked about, manipulating the wormholes, the gate mechanics and how they're different on a wormhole, and bubbles, because it's nullsec, right? I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's nullsec. Yeah, I like to always just say life is fluid, I mean, things in a wormhole change. Your neighbors change. What you have easy access to changes. One day you'll have a good connection to JITA. Ooh, everybody's thrilled now. We can run out to JITA and actually get some ships or, some supplies or whatever. Other times you've got a really crappy connection to the middle of nowhere and, what can you do? I guess you're not getting a new piece of equipment today. I don't believe Black Frog ships into wormholes, so I'm going to say no to that question. Yeah, I'm sure you do need to bring your own equipment related to production. I'm not aware that we have like communal BPOs or anything like that. There may be something like that. I'd have to put you in touch with somebody who does more with production. I don't do any of that stuff right now, so I just don't see it in the POSs though, right? So I would assume you do bring your own equipment. But we have the anchored bits that you want inside the POSs to facilitate it. Yeah, we can joke around about wormholes closing behind people, but actually that will happen to you. I can absolutely guarantee it. I was in a wormhole scanning part of the chain down. I ended up in a C6. I was scanning the SIGs down, and unbeknownst to me, behind me, in the hole I had left that wasn't our hole, I was several jumps away from where we live, the group that lived in that wormhole had spotted me when I went through and decided they didn't like it, so they actually rolled the hole behind me, and there I am now stuck in a Class 6 wormhole with no connection back to our wormhole or anything else. Like, I had to scan my way out. And it's going to happen sooner or later, either accidentally or on purpose. You'll be on the wrong side of a wormhole when it collapses, and there's more of the fun that happens in wormholes. You just hope that you can get back out again when that happens. Anyways, yeah, so I guess the thing I'll point out then is how do you learn to live in this environment? How do you lower the risk for being there? Well, it's a given. You will become one with your D-scan button. You'll become one with probing. It's just the nature of things, not hitting your D-scan quite frequently when you're in wormholes. I do it even when I'm cloaked up. I'm checking D-scan all the time because it's the only way you have any knowledge of what's going on around you. And even then it can be a little imperfect. Lots of people are flying around in cloaky ships. They will show up on D-scan, but only when they first break the gate cloak after they come through the wormhole. They'll appear briefly, and then they'll cloak. So, I mean, this sometimes is your only way of knowing that somebody came into the system is when you catch them. Same thing when you jump out. They'll appear briefly before they pop out of the system, so you will learn to love your D-scan. Probing and combat probing, jumping on top of people, punting fleets on top of people, these are all things that we end up having to do to live there. A term called picketing, which literally means having somebody in a scouting ship sitting, watching a wormhole for activations. Right? So if we're running sites and there's some dangerous connections, we don't like where the other wormholes go, maybe you've got a connection in nullsec or something, all it takes for one person to poke their head in, they'll D-scan, see your fleet in there running sites, and now they can go grab all their buddies, come back, and jump on top of you. So having somebody watching the wormhole, that's a very valuable activity. Those people get paid as if they had run the sites when they're picketing, is how important that is. We make use of extensive bookmarks. You can actually see them if you, I guess once we're out in space, when you right-click in space, you'll see under Corporation Bookmarks, there's a Wormhole Campus area. We make bookmarks so that it's relatively easy. It's very dynamic, right? You're adding and removing these bookmarks yourself as you scan down new signatures, but this is how you're able to find the wormholes when you get in there, and as long as we know there's connections, there'll be bookmarks in place to allow you to warp to the wormholes and things like that. And Mumble, of course. I mean, you're expected to be on Mumble really all the time anyway. Some people aren't always on it, but that becomes a problem eventually. They miss something. What's this prison community? Look at the misters. They're going to be another wormhole class in the near future. Oh, you haven't missed too much. The link that Jared just put up there, that sort of in text form summarizes a lot of what we've been talking about anyways. And we're just about to do the travel fleet. We'll chat more as we go, so I wouldn't worry about it at this point. Quick word about the neighbors. I mentioned them already. This notion that you know who your neighbors are, that changes like literally from moment to moment. And wormholes, the one end of them is, we'll talk about that when we fly out, so I won't get into that right now. But like the neighbors will change, right? I mean, all of a sudden a new wormhole opens up into your wormhole. If you're not watching, you won't even know that that new wormhole has opened up, and it's possible for new people to come through it, right? I mean, they're doing the same thing that we do, right? Putting out the area around them, looking for sites to run, trying to see if there's PvP to be had and the like. I guess I'll just mention that. Well, I'll talk about the hangar on the way there. Is there any questions? Let's clear out any more questions, and then we'll form up the fleet and head out because we can talk about some stuff while we're flying, and it'll be more fun to get into the campus. I think I've covered sort of most of the sort of nitty gritty of what it's like living in wormholes, the wormhole campus. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Now we'll go see it for ourselves. Any questions or anything before we go? The E-UNI wormholes plane, no system effects. That's correct. I guess, I should have mentioned that. I'm glad you jogged my memory. The system we're in is, it almost in a sense doesn't matter because we don't do much in our own system. We won't even run the sites in our own system. But wormholes, it is possible for them to have effects. There's a number of different types of effects that can be in wormholes, and they actually affect the operation of your ship. Some of them will give you higher DPS. Some of them will interfere with the operation of your shields or your armor or whatever. Black holes are the ones that we all live in. Well, I shouldn't say fear. It's just as soon as you go in and you see that the effect in the system is a black hole, people want to leave kind of soon because mucks with your targeting range. Your max targeting range will be greatly reduced, and inertia is totally different in a black hole. It takes you way longer to slow down, so it's kind of neat. You can get going really, really fast in a black hole, but you can't stop very quickly to the point where actually people will recall their drones, and the drones won't actually go back into your drone bay because they come back and they start orbiting your ship, but they're orbiting so quickly that they actually never get closer to your ship, never get into the drone bay. So these system effects can play all kinds of havoc with what you're doing. So just more indication of how fluid life is in the wormhole. Nothing is the same from day to day. So again, people like change. You'll like that. We don't run sites in our own system, and that gets back to the ganking clueless day trippers side of things. If we run the sites in our own system, then the clueless day trippers who come into the wormhole would not see anything to lure them further in, right? So you leave the sites there so that they'll come in and do something and we can kill them. Oh, yeah, Sill's not going to like me saying that. Yeah, the truth is it's bait. Yeah, sorry. I have this very relaxed attitude about that. And I picked it up from the other guys in the campus, so this was not something I went into the campus with this attitude. But now if somebody just doesn't have their ship named correctly, I like to lock them and try to encourage other people to blow them up. Is that true, Sil? Oh, I keep them for the honor? I guess. I'm sticking with my bait story. Also, you say, okay, there's the truth, also for the bait. Yeah, this is stuff we'll talk about on the way over there. Well, let's wait until we fleet up for this. So, everybody, I guess what we're going to have to do now is do the flip. So, I appreciate everybody coming. If anybody in this channel is not a member of EVE University, this is where it ends for you, unfortunately, because I can't take you to the campus. The nature of POS mechanics are such that if I bring you in there and bring you near the POS will start shooting you. And actually, to be honest, the other people in the wormhole campus are likely to start shooting you just because our rule is not blue shoot it. So I have to restrict the fleet to EVE Uni members only.